I'll wait for the thumbs up. 3, 2, 1.
Welcome, everyone. Happy Friday. Thank you all for joining us today for our Urban Financial Literacy Night with Mr. Ferreria Douglas. Thank you so much for being here with us tonight and talking us through all of these different aspects of finance. I know I'm excited to learn some things because I might be an adult, but I'm not an adult. So I'm excited to learn. So thank you for being here. And yeah, Wallace, do you want to say anything?
I just want to say thank you to everyone who is in attendance right now. I also want to say thank you to Mr. Ferreria Douglas. You're the man. Thank you for taking this on. I'm really excited for the kids to get a chance to really learn about, to have some financial literacy, to learn about like credit, to learn about taxes, learn about all the stuff that sometimes they don't teach you in high school that are really important as you become an adult. So again, I'm just really thankful for this opportunity. I'm thankful for everyone here, thankful for everyone who's watching, and I'm going to be tuned into because I'm sure there's a lot I need to learn as well. So thank you again.
And before I start, I'm going to put Ms. Lambert on the spot. And it's very cool that we have a school committee member on tonight. So Ms. Lambert, introduce yourself.
Thank you, Samantha Lambert, School Committee. I was very excited to see this. Had 2 teenagers graduate EHS in the past couple of years who that's the first thing they've said is, why didn't they teach us this stuff? And why didn't you teach us this stuff? Because a lot of it I didn't know either. So I'm excited, and there's a lot everyone will get from it.
Great, thank you. So my name is Courtland Mccarthy. I am the Vice Principal at Everett High School. We are so fortunate to have this opportunity. The thing I'm looking forward to the most is the helping and kids understand the language of finance, right? And the language of success. So this is to quote like a Kobe Bryant mindset. This is the beginning of success for the successful. Like it's one thing to have a moment in time where you feel like you have reached your pinnacle financially, but sustaining it is pretty difficult. In our community, it is tough. I mean, the numbers are there. The numbers are there. Like, I could be wrong. I know in Boston, the Black household is $8, right? And compared to their white counterparts, which is 240,000 or 225,000, something ridiculous like that, right? So how do we counter that? How do we close the wealth gap? And how do we work towards generational wealth as well? I know Mr. Ferreria Douglas is going to cover that. So without further ado, thank you, Mr. Ferreria Douglas, for joining us and spending a Friday evening with us as well. Let's get it.
Is that me? Am I doing that? All right. So the first thing I want to do is, first of all, welcome. Thank you for coming to our financial literacy night. Today, I want to talk about a little bit about wages and hopefully be able to share like one of my favorite life tips going forward. I had just amazing people in my life who have really helped me understand finances in a just much better way. We're going to talk about taxes. I think originally they wanted me to talk about credit, but when I was thinking about it, I said, like, what is one thing that I really didn't understand until I became an adult, and that's how taxes work, or more importantly, how that influences how much you make or how much you can expect to make. For those individuals who are here, who have my class, know that I like to highlight really amazing figures. I can tell you one of the people that I look up to, I was talking with, a mentor of mine, and what he said is, if you're going to talk about finances, you need to make sure that you mention Dick Gregory. Dick Gregory, if you don't know, is a comedian. He's an activist. He's a father and a leader. I want to play this clip just because of the fact that what he does is he takes comedy and he highlights social inequities that exist between for Black people and Black communities. And so one, I just think it's a funny clip because I really like how he talks about or exposes some of the social inequities. It's about 2 minutes. This is from the Black State of the Union. They used to have these events in the early 2000s where they would have a lot of the really prominent African-American leaders. And as a young person growing up, it's where I got to really meet a lot of really amazing people. And I was watching in 2008 and Dick Gregory said this. And so we'll start that off. And then just to let you know what the agenda is, we're going to go through background. I'll tell you a little bit about my story. Once again, I'll talk a little bit about wages and how that can impact people of color, especially Black individuals. I'll share a life tip. I'll talk a little bit about taxes, and then I'll have a call for educators in the middle, because that to me is an important piece to think about. And then we'll end up talking about credit. For the people who are here in the Zoom, if you have any questions along the way, please feel free to ask them, put them in the chat. Feel free to unmute yourself, even if you feel like you're interrupting me. I promise you, you won't be. A lot of this can be a little bit confusing. And then we'll have a Q&A. I was talking with my mom about what are some of the really important questions that people might ask. And so we'll see. I'm going to start with the clip, and then we'll go from there.
But first, let me forget the intellectual stuff right now, which I love. And I've got to get down to some personal business, which you'll probably find out about after we leave here. I was standing back in the back, waiting to come on when you had your sponsors out here. So when they came by, they passed me, and I did say something to them. And I know they're going to tell you. See, I thank the white dude from Walmart for my cousin. This past Christmas, they had prices so low, he didn't have to shoplift. Now, I know they're going to tell you. Yeah. The brother that passed by from ExxonMobil, now a lot of people don't know, they had gift packages for us, you know? And they had an ExxonMobil credit card for gas. Right. I gave him mine back. Because I said every time I go to Exxon and buy gas, I love water. A gallon of water costs more than a gallon of gas. Can you give me a water card? Yeah. And I'll be honest, the black brother from Wells Fargo, head of the mortgages, I pulled him over and said, I need to talk to you. He said, Brother Greg, you need a mortgage. I said, no, they took my house when times was good. I don't even know mortgage.
And so if you watch the rest of the clip, he goes on to talk about redlining and how redlining is something extremely important. Why is it important for you to have an understanding of your finances? Is because of the fact that generational wealth is something that is a really important thing to think about, and how you generate that generational wealth is extremely.
But first, let me forget.
Is extremely important. I want to talk just a little bit about who I am. My name is Courtland Ferreria Douglas. Mr. Ferreria Douglas is what most people call me, Mr. Douglas, or CFD for some people. I want to talk to you guys. A lot of the things that I have, or a lot of the knowledge that I have, is because of the fact that I just grew up in the community. I grew up in the People Center. The People Center is this amazing community center where I had the opportunity to spend time with really old people who were able to communicate things that were important in terms of giving back. They always talked about how each one teach one, each one reach one is an important staple in the community and all of those things. I grew up in the church, not to say that religion is the only thing that is important, but I got a lot of those things. And so part of, my upbringing, I like to think it was kind of shaped from the community. And because it was shaped from the community, I had an opportunity to really see a lot of what happened in the community play itself out. I also have worked for most of my life. I got my first real job when I was 14. My first experience of working was $8, or to me, when I was 8 years old, I was working as a waiter for about 4 years under the table. But I got my first real job when I was 14 as a courtesy clerk at Safeway, which is the person who bags groceries and stuff. Prior to becoming a teacher, I worked for 3 years as a chemical analyst and a researcher. And I've had 9 years of teaching, though I don't get paid like I have 9 years of teaching, but that's its own thing. But I do have 9 years of teaching. This right here is, I'm from Tacoma, Washington. This right here is a picture of my mom. And I'll talk a little bit about my mom's story. My mom, she works for the Department of Social Services, or DSHS. And she used to be, before she retired, the head of finances for the entire state. And so a lot of the stuff that comes with today's presentation are just really amazing tips that she was able to get from handling thousands, if not millions of cases all across Washington state. And so, I feel like I was really fortunate to have these types of people in my life to impart this type of wisdom. Before we start to talk about credit or taxes or any of those things, I think it's important that, people really have an understanding of what wages look like in America. I think, when I was young, I don't think I really had an understanding of what it meant to make a lot of money or what the average amount of people made in this country. People would tell me what they would make, and sometimes people would say it's a lot, and I didn't have any idea. And I was like, oh, it must be a lot of money if somebody told me it was. And so before we get started, I just wanted to just give you a glimpse into what is the average yearly salary in America. And so the average yearly salary in America, if you didn't know, is $48,672, right? So $48,672 is the average salary that people have. Here in America, I went off of 2019 just because 2020 was kind of a really kind of bad year. So I wanted to not throw it out, but not count it as much in terms of the averages. The one thing that I would point you to, though, is the median salary. If you guys don't know what median is, hopefully you guys remember that from math. People always tell me that it doesn't show up in our real life. A median is like the middle person, right? I take all of the people in America at the top and the bottom, right? And I find that one person in the middle, and the person in the middle person, or the median, makes $31,133. And so just keep that in mind when we start to think about, finances and wages and how those affect you. And later on, when we start to talk about taxes and how it affects this number, okay? The other thing that's important to think about are two things. Is one, in terms of looking at finances through the lens of both race and then age. And so over here on the left-hand side, they've broke it down into mean household incomes. Now, that is not like one person, that's like a household. So sometimes that can be one person, sometimes that could be two people. But when we start to look at the mean household income, how much average people make by race, you'll notice that it's an interesting breakdown when we think about Asian, white, Hispanic, or Latino, and then Black. And as you can see, Black families make significantly less than the other demographics that are in these particular groups. And so it's very, very important to think about that when you start to think about what you could potentially do later on. This one in the lower left is something that I didn't really think about until I started to really kind of itemize my life as to how much I should make or how much I could make as I continue to get older. And it was interesting to watch how much a person makes by age. And so I'm not going to go through all those numbers, but just know that it ranges from 21,000 when you're in your teens, coming right out of high school, and then later on when you're right out of college, into the midlife, and then later on, as a much older person. And so I think that like that to me is a very interesting part of it. And, the second thing that comes to mind when we start to talk about how much people make is also like what happens when we think about both unemployment, what happens in terms of people who aren't working, and what do the demographics look like for our country in that sense. So if you didn't know, they took a census recently. This is from December of 2020, and we have about 10.7 million Americans that are unemployed. However, although it says that we have a 6.7% unemployment, when we start to break it down, especially when it comes like, why is this important? Why is this conversation, financial literacy, important? Is because even though we have a 6.7 and they champion that low of an unemployment, when you look at Black unemployment is actually 16%. Which is significantly higher, right? That's almost like 1 in 5 African Americans are unemployed, which is a lot when you think about it. And so it's very, very important to think about these things and consider the conditions or the circumstances. I just wanted to, through this slide, kind of build an understanding of why it is important. And so before we go through, I wanted to show you what is, I guess, my first like real life tip that somebody gave me. I told you guys before that I spent a lot of time in the community, and, one of my favorite things was I had an older gentleman in the community who used to always just, I don't know what his deal was, but he always imparted wisdom onto me for some reason. He wasn't someone who had a bachelor's degree or college education. He was a Vietnam veteran, and so he would always just kind of expose me to things that he thought I needed to know. I remember I got my first job, and he basically, I did what I thought most people did, and I got my first job, I got my first paycheck, and I remember I came into the People Center and I was head to toe with tons of clothes. I bought my first pair of sneakers that were like really legitimate pair of sneakers. They were $147, and I was a big fan of Sean Kemp. I bought some kamikazes. I know a lot of young people who, when they first got paid, they just basically use them on sneakers. And Alphonse Jeffries, when I walked in, I thought he was going to compliment me on my attire. And he said, he wanted to go out to eat. And that's when I told him that I didn't have any money. And he said, you know what's worse than someone who's broke? He said, a person with a job who still has no money. And I remember him saying that. And I remember coming to him later, and he said, you know what you have to do? He said, this is the life tip that you should do, because every person should always be able to spend money if they have a job. He said, what you should do for the rest of your life is save 15% of everything that you make. He said, for every $100, he said, put $15 in savings. And so now in my life, what I did is basically I have it automated. So every time I get paid, 15% of everything, or 15 for every $100, gets funneled into my savings account. And that way, if I ever need to pay for anything, I can always have this extra money saved up for anything I want. And so just imagine, how much that is. Every 2 weeks, teachers get paid. My paycheck, just to let you know, is usually about $1,900. And so just imagine that 15% of that $1,900 always goes to my savings so that I can always make sure I have some money saved up. And so that has been something that has truly, truly changed my life in a way that I cannot explain to you. And so if you have a job, if you have any kind of finances anywhere, I would strongly suggest, not just to the students, to the adults out there, is set up your direct deposit so that you can funnel in $15 every single paycheck, and you'd be surprised how much that can go. It changes the way and retrains how you understand about available money, and the stress that you take away from like not having to live paycheck to paycheck can really help you make a lot of really positive choices. One of the biggest things that my mom said is that a lot of people, when they're in distress, they make poor financial choices. And so, when she did this, or when I did this, she said that was one of the, best sets of advice that somebody could ever give you. My brother, who we'll look at later, is someone who's very interesting because he did basically the opposite of all of this stuff. And you can kind of see how that financially, not to say that my brother is like a horrible or lives a horrible life, but it's definitely impacted his financial ability significantly. So I want to transition a little bit into what taxes are, because one of the biggest things that I had is taxes. Okay. Taxes to me is the one thing that I did not know anything about. Like I knew that there was things about it. Like when I was young, I knew that like taxes were a thing, but I didn't really understand what they were, right? I didn't understand how they come about and why people pay them, how much people pay. Was it just like, I remember, when I'd buy things and it cost a little bit more money, but I didn't really understand like what they were and how they worked with society. And so first, I just want to talk about just a rudimentary idea of what taxes are. So taxes, if you don't know, are fees that support government programs and are required by law to be applied to income, property, and goods. Taxes are collected at the federal, state, and local level. And so there's a lot of different things when you start to think about taxes. Like I said, if you have any questions as we go through this part, like you want me to go deeper into something, feel free to like tell me like, hey, you didn't explain this, and I'll go back and talk about it, because it can get a little bit, I can really like, I can go a little bit deeper into what they are. And so here, there's something that like, when you think about healthcare, right? Healthcare is something that it pays for. The hospitals that you go to, like that's a huge part of it. We have a lot of teachers here. We have a lot of education here. And one of the things is, right, is people from public school, you don't have to pay, right? You don't have to pay to go to school. I can tell you that I myself, my salary, a lot of the teachers in this room, their salaries are paid, from taxes, right? And this is one of the reasons why that equity portion is so important when we start to think about, a district funding itself, and how sometimes you can go to certain places and you can really see how much like just living in a specific place can impact the I guess how well something is. I remember one time, my father's from New Orleans, and if you go down there and you see the education in the schools down there, it's not to say that it's horrible as far as the life that's down there, because I love New Orleans, but this quality of the schools are significantly worse than they are in other places. And that's basically one of the things is because of the fact that, the taxes, they're not getting as much taxes because they're low income. The other thing has to do is pensions to pay retired individuals. I imagine, there are some individuals you always hear at the end, especially as educators, people who retire, those individuals get pensions every year, things that they've earned, all that stuff, right? And so let me see. Yeah. And so the other thing is employment insurance. One of the things that I hope to break a stereotype is if you ever go on unemployment, I always try to stress to students, like, don't ever feel bad for going on unemployment. I can tell you right now, I've gone and gotten unemployment at some point in your life. The reason why it's not a bad thing, and people talk about it like as if it's some kind of like someone's taking advantage of the system, you pay into it because they take taxes out specifically for individuals who might be on hard times. And so it's not bad for you to be able to get some of that back. And then there's also, the military, police, and fire, right? When a police officer or a firefighter comes and puts out a fire, you don't have to pay that person, right? When they do construction on the road, right? When you look at the potholes on the way to school or something like that, and then somebody repairs it, you don't have to, like, the guy with the stop sign doesn't stop you and then you have to pay him on the way in. And so it's important to understand that taxes are important for our society to function. And so when I think about taxes, I actually think it's like a really good thing to pay them, because I really appreciate the opportunities that it gives you. It's not just high schools or K through 12. We have state schools that give a lot of opportunities to people within that state. One of the things as I like to talk to students is, what are some really amazing pathways for students to take as far as good financial choices is go to state schools, because you guys might not know this, and I didn't know this until I really got deep into it. People ask me, like, would you still go to the same school that you went to? If you don't know, I went to a private liberal arts school. No, I would go to a state school, because if you don't know this, because they use your taxes to help pay for these state schools, you get half off of your tuition. And that's a big deal. And so going to a UMass school is not bad. Combine that with the fact that your guys' state schools are really, really good. And so you should definitely consider going to UMass. Some people consider those safety schools. I go like, those are really good places to put a safety school in, if that's the truth.
Why do taxes, my quick question is, why do taxes get half the country hates taxes? And, I know we're trying to educate our students, and, I'm sure they've heard whether it's their families or somebody in the community, just really rail against taxes. Why are people upset about it?
So there's a couple things. So one, I'm going to show you guys later. I'm going to show you guys a pay stub and that I have. And when you look at the amount of money that that you're supposed to make, like the salary that they tell you that you're supposed to have, and then you look at the amount of money that just literally gets like gobbled up, right? I don't want to say gobbled up, but like taken out of your paycheck, it is significant. Like it is a significant chunk of money that gets taken out of your paycheck. And so I think just first of all, just that action alone is enough for people to, when somebody says, hey, I'm going to cut your taxes, it's very appealing if you tell someone that, hey, you get to keep more money, and that can have a significant, I guess, short-term impact. The other thing is combine that with, you look at the policing issue that we have today, and there are some, you combine the fact that they take funds out, and then the things that they use it on are sometimes counterproductive to those communities. That's the second thing. And then the third thing that makes taxes kind of a very murky area is, if you happen to have taxes that come from that specific community, but the workers that are taxpayer funded are not from that community, right? That means that it's not that money isn't staying inside of the community, and that wealth is going to somewhere else, if that makes sense. And so, even those people who understand the taxes can truly kind of make it, they can have negative views of it because of, one, just the practice of taking money out, and then two, the practice of using that money in ways that I think either take it out of the community or go to places that I think are not as, I guess, as beneficial to the community as far as people see. And so I want to go into like the different types of taxes, okay? And so when I think about taxes, I think about income tax. If you don't know what income tax is a place where, based off of how much you make, right? Just because you make a certain amount of money, they take a tax out. So Massachusetts has a flat income rate, tax rate of 5%, as well as a flat statewide sales tax rate of 6.25. So that means that your income tax, basically how much you make in terms of income, they take 5% out of that. At the same time, there's another thing called sales tax, and sales tax happens every single time when you buy something. I remember when I was young, I think it was the first time I really understood what sales tax was. It was 11. I was about 11, and I was trying to raise money to buy this action figure. And I remember it was $19.99. I remember feeling really happy. I finally raised $20. And I remember getting to the store and I was like, here, I got $20. I worked really hard for this. And I remember going to the register and I was like, here, my $20, $19.99. I got the money. And the person was like, no, you owe like $1.07 or something. I was like, what are you talking about? Like, it said 19, I have a $20 bill right here. What are you talking about? And so everything that you buy, right, they apply 6.25 of that. So for your math teacher, right, move your decimal point 2 spaces to the left and then multiply it by what you have, and that's how much you have to pay. And so every single thing has sales tax. Now, there are certain places, and the reason why it becomes confusing is that there are some places that have sales tax. There are some places that don't. Here I have listed the 5 states that don't have any sales tax. So we're from Washington State, and anytime we needed to make a big purchase, we would drive all the way down to Oregon, and then we would pay for it because they didn't have any sales tax, and we would get it without the tax. There's also states that I didn't know that there was this many, but there are states that also don't have income tax. Apparently Alaska, I don't know how they get money because they don't have income tax or sales tax, which I find to be interesting. One of the other things that they take out is for property tax. And this is one that I really didn't understand until I bought my first car. So I bought my first car. I came right out of college. I bought my first car. I was really happy. It was about $2,500. I remember saving up for it once again. It should have been a precursor. I should have known from the time I tried to raise money for my action figure, but I bought my car. And I remember getting to the DMV and I had just enough money to buy my car and to register, where you get the license plate and makes it so that you can legally drive your car around. I remember having to leave because the lady, I thought it was going to be like $50, $75. She told me it was $450 just to register my car. And I was like, I don't have that at all. And so when you buy property like cars or a house, it comes with this extra property tax that you have to pay. And so that's the reason why it's not just the amount of money that is the price tag on the item. You have to pay this extra money called property tax that you might not have factored into it. And so, that to me is, why do some states not have any taxes? That's a good question. So part of it really has to do with voting. I would tell you that this is one of the reasons why voting is extremely important. Part of it has to do with the fact that the individuals vote this way. It also has to do with the makeup of the taxes that they do have. Also, there are some states that support the other states, if that makes sense. My mom was talking to me about how there are some states in which they pay into or make up for some of the dividends that come from some of the other states. So like places like New York pay or kind of help subsidize some of the states that are kind of have a fallout in terms of taxes. And so it's a really interesting process. The last type of tax that I want to go through that I don't want to spend too much time on it is estate tax. And that's for if you die. All right, so I want to go through, talk about FICA just for a second. FICA is something where they take money out of your account. And so I wanted to highlight this. And so when you look at some of the contracts that people have, right? I remember I used to watch and see people have these amazing contracts. Mahomes, he signed a $503 million. I thought he got to keep all of it. I wanted to show you a pay stub. This is a pay stub from a couple years ago. And so here you can see I got technically in this one paycheck, I got a certain amount of money in terms of my gross pay was $1,977. But as you can see, Medicare, federal income tax, and Massachusetts tax, they took out $280 from my account. At the same time, you also have to pay things that are deductions from your actual job. So I have to pay for my my medical insurance. I have to pay for my retirement, which I could potentially have later on. And then my union dues, because you have to pay to be inside of a union, took out another $300. So I got paid $1,977, but I only got to keep about $1,400 of it. And so if you were a person who made $65,000, I didn't realize that people don't get to keep all the money that they make. Instead, 26% of that I had to give to the government, and I didn't realize that. And I think that it's something that when you're a student, you really don't realize that when people are talking about how much they make, your parents, they don't get to keep all the money. And I didn't realize that. What is it all for? It's a really important thing called Medicare and then Social Security. And I think that it's super important. One of the things that I want to talk about is how important it is to think about, teaching. And I can tell you right now, as someone who's a Black educator, that it's something that you should think about. Having at least one Black teacher in your life can have a huge impact about dropping out and all of those different things. And so I want to push individuals to try or think about having that in their lives. And so I don't know if we have enough time to play the video, because there's a lot more slides and I'm definitely taking more time than I should have. Anyway,
I don't mind. Yeah, we good.
Man.
Diversity matters. I've never seen an all-white school with all Black teachers. But I've seen many, many, many all-Black schools with all-white teachers.
We live on the south side, so pretty much all the schools are Black, but we have like a lot of white teachers, so we're kind of like left out.
All of the teachers were white, and I thought, we're Black people. There are no Black faces in this building. So I went to the principal. I said, so here's the thing, you're gonna hire me because I'm going to do amazing things in your school. He looked at me like, girl, he hired me, and I did amazing things in his school.
Me seeing a Black teacher, like a whole Black staff, and I was like, wow.
I never had a Black male no teacher till I got to high school.
A Black male teaching the class is very powerful because he can touch other Black males.
I think that's something we need to address. Definitely as a community, offer more incentives for African American male teachers, more supports as they enter the profession, because the sisters are doing it. The brothers, we need to step up.
And so, one of the things that I didn't realize is, how much educators make. And, I showed you guys before about how the mean household income, at least for Black individuals, is $58,000. So that doesn't necessarily mean one person, that could be two people combined. And so I want to push individuals to consider education as a possibility. Not only do you get healthcare, all the holidays and the summers off, 180 official days. That's not to say that those are the only days that you work, because as all the teachers can tell you, some of them are probably going to spend some point of the next week working, or all of those things. But I want to push this. This right here is for Everett. This is the pay scale. And I really think that, my life changed when when I first started to get into teaching, and someone said, like, this is the amount that you could potentially make. And I didn't realize that. A lot of times I thought about teaching. People in news tell me that, like, oh, teaching is not very lucrative. You don't get paid that well. And I'm not saying that teachers get compensated what they should make, but what I'm saying is that you can live a good life, right? So basically every single one of these steps is 1 year. Right. So here's 1 year for your first year in teaching, at least in Everett, and you have a bachelor's degree, you get $53,000. And so already you make almost what most Black households make in America. And so that's a very, very important thing. And so when I think about it, like I said, Mr. Douglas should be down here where the 9 is, but still, Mr. Douglas is not salty about it because of the fact where he does make, which is the fifth step level, he still makes more than most Black households. And so
you're not upset at all. You're not bugging at all. Go ahead.
No, I can tell you right now, I'm a very blessed person, and I tell everybody that. My students, I like to think, Mustafa knows, when I send them my rewards for getting really good grades, I always tell them part of that is because I have put myself in a position to be able to do that. I'm a very blessed person, and I can do that for my students. But what gave me that ability is to understand it, right? A lot of the teachers here have master's degrees. And so just imagine how much education can make it so that you make more money, right? And so there's a lot of reasons to go into education. And so I just wanted to highlight that before we move on to the credit part. I don't even know if we have time for the credit part, but anyway. They wanted me to come in and talk to you guys about credit because there's a couple myths.
Excuse me, Mr. Ferreria Douglas. There's always time to talk about credit.
Thank you.
Let this be a disclaimer. This is everybody has their own truth out there. If you feel otherwise, this is just what Mr. Ferreria Douglas believes is the best route to go. Sorry, I had to lawsuit proof us.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. I appreciate that. That's right. I can tell you right now, I always think that, I'm trying, I want you to strongly think about education. I would tell you that we need as many amazing people to live your best life, because I want you to come to my classroom and talk to my kids. So that's what I want you to do. So if you like education is not for me, Ms. Dux, I'd be like, yes, but just let me know when you can sign up to be a guest in my class, because I would love to have other people come in. But do you get paid for the summer? So the cool thing about it is you get paid year round. So it's a full year thing. You can have it, Mustafa, where you get paid during the summer, where you get a paycheck every single week, or there are some school districts, sometimes you can decide which way you want it. In Medford, you were able to decide if you wanted to just get paid during the school year, or if you wanted them to stretch it out over all 52 weeks. And so it depends on the district you're in. I believe this one, they don't let you choose. At least I didn't have a choice. I don't think I did. Somebody can tell me if I have more rights than I think I do. Because I don't think they ever talked to me about that. So I get paid every week, even during the summertime, which was actually pretty cool. I want to talk about credit. Credit is very interesting, because credit is something that I think there's a lot of myths out there, and I think there's a lot of practices that like older people tell younger people to do. And my mom says that if there's anything that you need to tell younger people is to, one, I would tell older people to stop telling younger people those things. And then two, young people stop listening to what the older people say, because you shouldn't do those things. What is credit? Credit is the ability to borrow money or access goods or services with the understanding that you'll pay for it later. And so it's an important thing to think about, because, what is it for? What can credit be made for? So let's say that you wanted to buy a car. Let's say you wanted to buy a house. If you don't know, I put some samples of cars down here. Mr. Douglas is not wealthy enough to buy this car, but this is a Volt. It's an electric vehicle, really amazing. It costs $23,000. And so if you wanted to purchase that, you would need to have $23,000. Most people don't have $23,000 just hanging around, right? They did a census prior to the pandemic, and they found that most people are living paycheck to paycheck and don't have the ability to pay for $400 more in money. And so how can they potentially have $23,000 to pay for a new car? They can't do that. Combine that, let's say Mr. Douglas wanted to I would like to have a house, right? Like, that doesn't seem like a crazy idea. I would like a house one day. Let's say that we had this house. I'm not saying that that is the greatest house, but $175,000. Most people don't have $175,000. And so how does a person pay for these amazing things that, in my opinion, are staples in American life? How do you do that? Because most people don't. They get it with credit. Credit allows you to take or borrow money with the idea that you will eventually pay for it later. And so it's an interesting system that people have. And so some people think that, credit is this idea that you just have this excess money out there. You do have to pay it back. And so it's one of the things that you have to think about. There are also 5 other instances in which your credit score can have influence over you. One of them, landlords check when you apply to live somewhere, like you want to get an apartment or something like that. Landlords check your credit to decide if they want to rent to you. Okay. And so here, utilities is another thing, right? Sometimes they'll check to make sure that your credit is good before utilities will give you gas or internet or something like that. One of the more interesting things are like employers who sometimes make choices in terms of their hiring practices because of your credit. Sometimes they use it to verify a person's identity. It's a rare thing, but sometimes it does happen. The one that's the biggest one, and one of the biggest reasons that you want to have good credit, is because insurance and banks use it to find a a specific loan rate. So if you got a loan, the higher your credit, the lower the percentage on the credit card. And so I'll get into that a lot more when we go into the next slides. What are the credit scores based around? They have a range. And so they go from 530 and then they go up to 850. And so all of those different things. And so what you want to be able to do is make sure that you're in the upper part of it, because here they're trying to show you, I think this table does a really good job of showing you how having a lower credit can really lead to limited amount of credit or access to higher credit, which can really lock you into a specific financial place. And historically, when we start to talk about redlining, which we're going to get to later, how that can lock individuals' generational wealth, and it leads to a lot of racism. And so we're going to talk about that as we go forward. I want to talk a little bit, once again, I talked to my mom. My mom is Courtland Ferreria Douglas. She's the head of finance. I like talking about my mom's story because my mom started, she didn't have a college degree. She has a high school diploma. She started as a secretary. She worked for 35 years with the state. And then she eventually became the head of finance for the whole entire state. And so I love my mom's story because she went from being a secretary to like, yo, I run the whole state. So I just like to throw some shine on my mom because she's super amazing. One of the things, and you can totally give me a thumbs up if you've heard someone say this, is a lot of adults will talk to young people and tell them that you should get a credit card so you can start to build your credit. That's what they say. You should get a credit card to start to build your credit. And what my mom says is if there's one thing that older people need to stop telling younger people is they need to stop telling people that this is a legitimate way for you to build your credit. It is true. And so we're going to talk about it later when we talk about what goes into credit in the next slide. But my mom tells you it is very dangerous. And more importantly, usually young people, it doesn't have a benefit in their life to get a credit card before they're ready. And so when my brother, who's older than me, when he went to college, and also when I went to college, my parents made my brother and me promise not to get a credit card when we went to college. But as my brother, he obviously went to college and he did not listen to that. The reason why that is a bad thing to tell someone is because if someone gets credit, they don't have any of the history that you would need in order to have good credit. And so what that means, if you have a low credit score, that means that you have higher rates. And so that means if you borrow money, you have to pay more, and you have to pay more and pay more and pay more. And so individuals should not get these credit cards until they're more situated, until they have a more stable platform and a more stable life to be able to have that. That leads to very large amount of average credit card debt that individuals would have. I wanted to just give you some insight into when individuals usually get their first credit card and how that can kind of affect you as you go forward. Most people get their first credit card either in college or after college. The reason why a lot of people get it in college is because that's their first opportunity as an adult. I also think that the myth plays itself into it, is that a lot of people would get it while they're in college. Plus, in colleges, as we're going to see, there's a lot of moments where people will try to get you to get a credit card, right? There's tons of times I go to Old Navy and they try to tell me that like, hey, if you get this credit card, I get extra 35% for no reason, right? Just because I'm special, I guess. No, it comes with like the special credit card that they trying to get you to, right? Yeah, and so when you go to colleges, like Mccarthy is saying, is that when you go to colleges, there's like a person right there. You know how like sometimes when you are high school senior, there's like military people who try to talk to you about it. Not that these are the same, because military is a total viable option, but at colleges, there's always like a credit card person there trying to get you to sign up. And so they got my brother. He ended up not even graduating. After 1.5 years, he ended up getting $7,000 in debt using his credit card. And so the question you might have, right, or the reason why it's a problem is because when you borrow money, you don't just pay back the amount you borrow, you have to pay interest. And so the lower or the higher your credit card, the lower your interest rates are. And so, let's say that you borrow $100, right? I borrow $100 at 8.25%. It means that I don't just pay the person back, right? It's not like my uncle who gives me $100 and like I'm cool with him, and so he just takes $100 back and we're fine. I have to pay him have to pay whoever gave me that money at 8.25. I have to pay him $8 more for every $100 that I spend. And so this is how, when you go to college and you take out a student loan, sometimes it can balloon to this really, really large number, right? Not $100. Mr. Douglas was, taking out loans in the thousands of dollars to be able to pay for his college. When I first got my first loan, that's the reason why, what did I do? I co-signed with my mom so I can kind of use some of her credit to give me a lower rate, which is what some people will do when you go to college, and so that to me is extremely, extremely important, right? You see it a lot of times at baseball games. People are talking about their t-shirts. A lot of times when you go to a sports game, there's always somebody who's trying to get you to buy like their really cheap towel or something like that. All right, so let's talk about, I don't know how long we're gonna spend on this because there are 5 ways that you determine your credit score. And a lot of people don't even know what these 5 things are, these 5 factors, and they're super important. And when my mom talks about them, she says that like most people fall into pitfalls when they're young because of the fact that they don't have the ability or the sustainability to pay back the money that they borrow. And so it's very, very important that you understand this, because it's one of the reasons why my mom heavily says that the biggest thing that you can do is to not get a credit card until you are in a certain position. And so the first one, and this is the first and the largest determining factor of your credit, is that, your payment history, right? Anytime that you happen to have some type of bill of service, or anytime that you happen to take out a line of credit, and some people think that you have to have a credit card in order to do this. That's not true, okay? And so when we start to think about the payment history, if you take out a loan for college, you just took out a line of credit. They don't technically call a credit card or call it through a credit card, but you've done that. And so part of your payment history for me has been paying my credit card history every single time. Okay, so every time I make a payment on my credit, every time I make a payment on my student loans, that's making history in my payment that I paid, right? That I paid that amount, that I paid that amount, that I paid that amount. Anytime that I take out any type of thing that comes with the payment plan, it gets registered in this place. And by me just simply paying off my bills and paying off my loans, my student loans, literally, I get credit points for that. And so over time, just by you living your life, my mom says that you will generate enough payment history to have a good credit score by the time you get your first like established job. And so you need to stop doing that kind of thing. The second largest point is that if you have a lot of like things, right? If you just keep borrowing people's money, eventually you'll borrow money to the point where you can't pay back anyone. And so the second thing is how much they look at how much you are owed. And so for me, one of the things that kind of has delayed or made me think about when to get my master's degree is wanting to make sure that I paid off my college loan, my undergraduate college loans, so that I can have a higher percentage when I apply for graduate loans, because the amount owed will be less and I'll have a higher credit score for that. Also, the length of credit history. And so this is where there is some legitimacy for when people say you should get a credit card and get a credit card early, because how long you've had a line of credit does improve your credit score. But the reason why adults need to stop telling young people this is because it's only worth 15%. You're only telling them a very marginal amount that's going to do it. And the other thing is that your history of credit, if you have within that time not paid back anything, you're hurting yourself. And you're not even adding that much to you. And so a lot of young people get credit cards and they can't pay it back because they don't have the income to do so. New credit score, FICO, considers how many new accounts you might have. And so that's an important thing. And then the types of credit. I don't want to get into the types of credit because it's kind of difficult. Just know that there are a lot of different types of credit that you can have out there. Okay. And so like, it's really important that you understand these type of things. And so I want to go into what this means is that getting credit cards early actually leads to more debt and higher rates. And anytime you delay payments, like a deferment on your loans or any of those things, you most likely add to the debt that you already owe, right? If they tell you that you owe $100,000, you're like, hey, I can't pay it, I want to delay it for like 2-3 months, you'll find out, you come back later, you don't owe $100,000. It went up. It went up. And so, you know, a lot of times you're just paying that off. And so it leads to a longer amount of time that you have to pay off, which leads to a lower credit, which leads to higher and higher rates. And you get into this vicious cycle of the fact that you can't pay off when you want to. It leads to a lower economic mobility. And I want to take this time to highlight a social inequity that happened in America called redlining, where they would take Black communities, and the reason why this is historically important is because they would do this to Black individuals, where they would take the same house and severely lower the value, or redlining meant that, hey, people in this red area, you can't even get a loan. Okay. And so I'm going to play this video that went super viral. You might have seen it on TikTok. It's extremely funny, but it's also extremely poignant.
Ma'am, can you pick out the man that robbed you? Number two. Oh.
Y'all know that's up, right?
Oh, yeah.
Sir, can you pick out the man that embezzled hundreds of millions of dollars from the American economy and then made you pay for it?
You mean after systematically devaluing my education and relegating me to certain neighborhoods, whereas I couldn't actually pursue the education that would enable me to rise to meet a certain fiscal stature in this country?
And also preventing you from making any loans for homes or jobs or businesses or getting a car lease.
And so it's an extremely funny clip, but it highlights a social inequity of really interesting things that redlining actually kind of severely generationally made it so that Black individuals could not generate wealth. And so it's an important thing to think about. It reminded me, it was funny, I have no clue if it's still there. It might be there since I don't think they have any new exhibits for 2020, so it could just still be there. And so one of the things, please, for the people who are putting this in the chat, please do not put your money in like a mattress or something like that. Banks are good for you. Please go to the bank. Please don't do that. I just want to, I don't know if that's a joke, but please do not be like, yo, the money is in the safe. Please don't be that person who's like peeling money off of people. Please go to a bank. If you want to, go to an online bank. Mine is Charles Schwab. I really appreciate it. I'm just throwing it out there. You can get stocks and stuff like that. Charles Schwab is a good bank, but I'm just saying, please, for the people in the chat, do not. Banks are very trustworthy. Don't put it in your mattress, please. this is an extremely important thing. They had an exhibit at, I forget what architecture school, and WBUR covered it in Boston, where they talked about, it was really interesting, where they talked about redlining in Boston. I was talking with the student this afternoon about how racist Boston, or at least the racist roots that Boston has. One of them is severely when we think about redlining and the effect that had on people. I'm not going to talk about this. I want to move on because I want to make sure I have enough time for questions. I want to talk about what you should do and when you should get your credit card, because that's one of the big questions, right? Mr. Douglas is saying that you shouldn't get your credit card. When should you do it? You should do it after you have a stable job, right? I'm not talking about that minimum wage job, although I'm not saying that that's a horrible choice. But when you have a stable job, right? When you have something that has a salary, right? I would say after you get your first college degree or whatnot, I think that's a good choice. I always tell students, push you to get a college degree, because I can tell you right now, Mr. Douglas will never, ever accept a salary less than $40,000. That's just legit. Don't even come talk to me about it. I will not accept that job. And I tell students, as much as my student loans are, I would burn cars outside. Just burn them and see, like every day, Mr. Douglas come up with a new ride and then he just sets it on fire in the afternoon. If that gave me the financial flexibility to make it so I'd never have to live in poverty. And so what is a college education? Even a bachelor's one like myself, give you the opportunity to have that fiscal mobility. And so I have a stable job. And so I do have a credit card now that I have a stable job. Or if you so happen to at some point get a large amount of money. So if you stumble into a large amount of money, somebody gives it to you through an endowment or an estate, or if you win the lottery, something like that is a good choice. What you should spend your credit on. Some people think that you should spend your credit on like really small things. My mom says that you should spend your credit on really these big things: cars, houses. Anytime you have business capital, so like when you go out and create a business, something like that. My mom said that vacations is a really good option for some reason. My mom was like, it's just because it's really expensive. That's the only reason, is because a lot of people don't know how expensive vacations are. And then your college loans are really loans of any kind. Basically, it comes down to any purchases. And once again, I want you to watch out for how many times, and you don't realize this as a young person, how many times when you get older, people will approach you to take out loans. Samuel L. Jackson trying to tell me all the time what's in my wallet. Old Navy, all of those times that I go shopping at Old Navy or Gap or something like that. Before I end this, I just want to say, Mr. Douglas, milestone, February 19th, Mr. Douglas. Oh my God, you paid off all your student loans. I'm just putting it out there. It's an extremely important thing. And so when we think about credit, I know that this is just a small overview, but I wanted to make sure that you understood that. I think it's something that you need to know. You guys live in a world, though, that is super digital. So you guys live in a cool world. I remember my mom, she used to do taxes with this big, huge amount of receipts. You guys don't have to do that anymore. She used to have this weird calculator where she hit it and it just like stream out this big, huge ribbon that she'd have to submit. Now you can do H&R Block. You can do Intuit, TurboTax. That's what I do. Tax preparation. You can also do it free online. Me and Miss Wilkie found that out. And then if you want to know your credit score, you can go to freecreditscore.com and you can know it. I don't think it works for people who have no credit, so you probably can't do it, since I don't know if people who never have any credit can do it, but it's a nice thing to do. Anyway, that is pretty much the presentation. I just wanted to put out just the summary of the 4 things that I think you should think about. Life tip: save 15% of everything that you make, 15 out of every $100. If you have a job, you should have money in savings. Taxes: you don't get to keep all of your salary. State, federal, property, and sales tax, you want to consider it when you think about it. Credit cards, not until you have a stable job. Using a credit card early will lead to higher rates and more debt. The last thing I want to push for, once again, individuals to consider, not just education, but the importance of looking out for ways that you can give back. That doesn't mean education, but I can tell you right now, if you don't look for them, you'll miss those opportunities. I strongly, strongly love that I had enough people in my life who told me each one teach one, each one of each one, that which much is given, much is expected, and that education is a good life. That's what I got.
Thank you. All right, there's gonna be a Q&A. If you want to share your screen so I can see some of these amazing faces. Here's the thing. And this is all a matter of clearly opinion and research. Everybody here is, folks are eager to ask a couple of questions. So what does that mean? And what are some of the tips we would want besides the ones that you gave, which are great, right? Anyone walking in a building with all income does that. But what does that mean for our students who are in a gateway/urban community town? Why should we take financial literacy more seriously?
I don't know if that's specifically for me. So what I would say is that
for you.
Sure. So when I think about, my mom, because she's with DSHS, she has an opportunity to specifically target individuals who come from low income places. And so one of the things that she says is so important is the fact that generational wealth is a real thing, and monitoring your generational wealth is extremely important. And what she sees a lot of times, because she has to deal with so many different people, she deals with poor individuals, but then she also deals, because the fact she has to deal with government, individuals who have that generational wealth. And she says that one of the biggest things and one of the ways that these people get locked into the situation that they're in is because they don't understand that financial literacy. She says that individuals would benefit heavily from any kind of course. There should be some type of aspect. She said that she doesn't think that there should be an actual course just on this, but there should be a portion of your high school experience where you learn about this idea. And she said that most, if not a lot of the financial problems that people have, especially, she's talking about DSHS, and she says that it's financial situations are one of the leading determining factors that leads to individuals to have children and go into foster care, right? And how impactful that can have on a person's life. In terms of generational wealth, when we talk about generational wealth, we're not even talking about, when you think about foster kids, those individuals, we're not talking about generational wealth in terms of poor individuals. They don't have a connection to any type of wealth because they're foster children. And so why should those individuals have some type of exposure? And why does it, for Black and brown individuals with the legacy that they have attached to it, you have to educate them about their financial and fiscal responsibility.
There's a question in the chat from Ms. Martins. How you doing, Ms. Martins? What would be the best time for a young person to buy their first car, and the best financial scenario and or steps to prepare for this big step?
So first of all, I think this is one of the things that my father would tell you a story about how, because I remember when I first wanted to buy my first car, and he'll tell you about the story about how he walked past this Porsche dealership every day, and he wanted to buy a Porsche dealership, or a Porsche, which is an amazing car if you don't know what that is. And he raised money for about a year and a half to be able to buy this really high class Porsche, and he bought it and he loved it for about a week or two. He loved being able to drive it, and he said after a while the novelty of having a Porsche, it wore off eventually. And so the first thing I would tell you, Stephanie, is first thing you need to do is get educated on your expectation to what you need from a car. And so a lot of people get locked into buying particular cars. And I think the first thing I would tell you is get educated on the car that you think you need, because a lot of people want to buy that newer car or any of those things when really you should get the hoopty ride, that is, my first car was a 1988 Toyota Corolla stick shift that was cold in the wintertime and didn't have no CD player. So for me, my first car was $800. I'm not saying that you have to buy that exact same car, but try to understand where you are in your life and how much like that can impact you. So what I would say is I think you could probably buy a car when you're in high school, so long as you understand and are willing to save. It took me 2 years to buy my first car, generate enough wealth to get $800. But I would say if you keep your expectations in check, you can get a pretty good car. What are the best financial scenario and or steps to prepare for this big step? I can tell you right now, I cannot tell you, if you have a job, please set up the 15%. Man, it was like when I had to make a big purchase, it was not difficult because I had $15 for every $100 I had saved up. Like it was already there. So like I literally I just bought this new camera right here. This camera right here costs $2,500. I just bought it. And part of it is because when you are fiscally sound, Stephanie, you don't have that burden of whether or not you have money. So I would say fix your borrowing power by creating and really thinking about budgeting to save the money that you do have. And so what I would say is take whatever amount that you have, figure out how much you need to live. And then what you need to do is decide how much you need for spending and then save the rest of it in your savings account. And that is what you should do. So to me, there's not like a one step like that you can do for everything, but have an understanding of budgeting so that, hey, I have this extra money that is just automatically funneling into this pool that I can take from. And so it's not as big of a burden for you in your solutions.
We have a comment and a question. Comment is big purchases should not be emotional. Always go home and give it 2 days. Sales pressure is real. Absolutely, 100%. And also there's a thing when it comes to poverty, if you come from poverty and you get, I don't know, last week when we first started doing this, I spoke about some sort of like if there were reparations, right? And how I believe that educational reparations is greater than money, because legitimately someone who grew up poor, right? I know if it came out and say, hey, we're going to give every Black person $50,000, you know what I'm doing. At 22, I'm spending that all, right? And as opposed to wanting something that could be more tangible for a longer period of time. So that's why it's hard sometimes when you finally start putting some money in your account and you look at your account and that thing is like, spend me, please, like hurry up and spend me. And so resisting that sort of thirst to spend your money all the time without having that patience is very critical, young people. The question is by Bree is, given recent events in the stock market, what are your thoughts on investing, especially for young people? Great question.
Yeah, to me, that's a really good question. So first of all, just to tack on to Ms. Lambert's question is, my father has a rule. He learned this from his Porsche days, because like I said, Porsches are not cheap. And so what he said, he learned from that. He said, whatever you want, what you need to do is you wait 1 month until after you want it. And then if you still want it, then you can get it. That's his rule for life, is that if you have something that you want, you either planned a month ahead of time, or what you did is you made sure that take the day that you want it and then fast forward your life 1 month. And if you still want it, then you know that it's a real thing, right? And so that's one thing. 2, stock market. Stock market is very, 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 very interesting and very difficult to really kind of understand. What I would say is this: if you're trying to enter the stock market, every single year they publish the top 5 most stable stocks. Those are good stocks to invest in. I would tell you, there's some companies that are just off the top of my head that my family has stocks in. Johnson's & Johnson's is, to me, the most stable stock that I could ever think of. If you don't know who Johnson & Johnson's is, they're the people who make like all the little like medical equipment and stuff like that. some of you might have some Johnson & Johnson floss in your bathroom right now and just don't know it. There are a lot of really stable stocks. And what I would say is make sure, because they publish this stuff every morning. I used to watch a stock show right before I went to school. I really didn't know that much about it. But when you think about investing your money, a lot of people will want to do, like the really amazing thing, the really sexy thing, and go out and find those like startups and put your money there. I'm not saying that that's a bad choice, because some people do make a lot of money if your choice like hits. But in my opinion, if you don't have that type of capital, you should invest in those top 5, top 10, top 20. They make a list every year. You won't make a lot of money, but you'll make more money sequentially. And so our family, we have invested in those types of stocks. I'm not going to lie to you and tell you that we've made a lot of money, but one thing that's true about those top 20 stocks is that they almost guarantee that you will make money from the time that you borrow initially. And so that's an extremely important thing. One of the things that is important as well is, I would tell you, hopefully fast forward your life like 10, 15 years. As you go to college, that person who's about to become an accountant, yeah, he gonna give you the homie hookup if you're friends with him. Our family, the way we got it is because my father happened to know an accountant, and so he is our friend, and then he also happens to be our private accountant who handles the books. I can tell you, unfortunately, this is a place that I'm not as good in the stock market, but what I would tell you is that stocks are not a bad place to put your money if you go with those stable companies. That's what I would say, is those stable companies are the ones that I would
and building a network, right? You have Bree, you brought some people in here as well. And when you build a network, the homeboy, homegirl hookup becomes real, right? And these are your friends, and you have a friend who is a lawyer, or a doctor, or a teacher, someone, someone who's in sales as well. And then part of building and establishing wealth is your network, right? You may not see the money in itself there right now, but it's some of the things that by having a network is truly invaluable. So I think maintaining friends who have and a network who have a similar interest, and Johnson & Johnson is a good call because they get sued all over the place and they're still in business. So that means that they actually are so powerful they can get sued and still survive and still put out things that give people health problems. But that's another story. Another thing is, before we wrap up, I really want to thank you. This is actually going to our archives. This is like gold. I believe that when you come from an urban district, that you tend to there's so many things that become the priority, like survival, living, right? That sometimes getting to the college campus where those 10 people run up on you with a MasterCard or a Visa, and you're saying, yep, I'm going to take this and I'm going to take this t-shirt, is because you feel like, hey, I'm so far away from, I've dealt with so much worse, right? I've made it, right? Like that, for me, that's what happened to me. I was like, I can't believe I finally got a credit card, until that credit card became 10 credit cards with a lot of debt. And you're in your late 20s trying to get a job. And, I was fortunate to be in education by then. So I think how this content is relative to our community is for a few reasons, right? One, when they could understand, our students could understand the world beyond Everett. If they want to return to Everett, they'll be more empowered by being more financial literate, and then two, investing in themselves, right? And become your first investment. Somebody told me my first investment should be in me, right? And once you're able to do that, you become a lot more knowledgeable and you have a desire to want more, and to not, and money becomes, the idea of money becomes a lot less of a burden. And number three, is that you get to you get to build, right? You get to build generational wealth. My philosophy is a little different in terms of that. I feel my son is 17, and I'll share. My son is 17, and once he's able to sustain a life of his own, and have the Porsche or whatever he wants, or whatever, the education or whatever he wants, I retire. I don't want to go to the grave with all of my money. I kind of want to just spend my money between when I retire and when I'm out of here. So I believe that's important too, right? Like you deserve to retire and live, not retire on the verge of dying.
Yeah, you're right. To me, like one of the things I want to stress is, the greatest thing that you can do is invest in yourself and put yourself in a position. And the greatest thing that you could think about is, your education. For the students in my class know that, we try to expose you to tons of different people. When I talked to you about Malala, I told you before, if you want to impact someone's life, right, you want to really damage someone, take away their opportunity for education, right? What did Malala say, for the people who remember the clip? Where education comes questioning, but education comes critical thinking, where education comes more opportunities, and that people who are educated see the world from a different perspective, right? And so if you want to do that, you have to be able to really don't allow someone to take away your educational opportunity, because that can lead to fiscal opportunity, right? And so that to me is one of the biggest things. Get your education. Why is getting a college degree? I promise you, it ain't the fact that I just got a piece of paper and it costs a lot of money. But what I would tell you, we went to a Latino leadership conference, and the person who was there was a lawyer who has more degrees than I ever think I'll ever have. And what he said is the thing that makes him valuable is not his degrees, but his ability to network and be able to pull resources together, and then two, his opportunities that he is able to see and have that, I guess, freedom to be able to participate in. My father said that the greatest thing that he's proud of his family for is the fact that his family is not poor. When you do not have to worry about poverty, you begin to gain more opportunities. And so that to me is step one, is to make sure that you don't have to have that. And getting an education is a big part of that.
Yes. And, as we look at our students, and people always tell our kids, we want you to do well. We want the best for you. We want you to be great. And then it's like, all right, have a good day. It needs to be like, all right, listen, this is me, and if you're white and you share your story, I tell people all the time, especially my white allies, I said, listen, most kids of color don't ever believe that you were once broke. And I know more white folks who have been broke than folks who haven't, right? And I think the perception that our students tend to have is like, hey, you're white, you're rich, you know what that wealth looks like, boom. But the question coming back, you have to just push back at the student and say, hey, listen, my opportunity is greater. So this is why X, Y, and Z is important for you to do this, and for you to learn the language of finance at an early age. And and it's not that schools don't offer financial literacy. It's just that it's not emphasized as a part of their daily functioning in the lives, and it's not part of the plan in terms of changing a kid's trajectory, stopping them from going through the school to prison pipeline. It's almost disaligned. However, in the suburbs, I saw this thing the other day when I was thinking about this event, and we'll close. There's more financial literacy classes offered in the suburbs than they do in urban districts. So if the suburbs got all the money, what they need financial literacy for? Of course they need it. Everybody needs it, right? And so for me, 100%, I absolutely thank you, because I, as a 44-year-old man, I'm like, geez, I forgot about this. Geez, I forgot about that. Oh my gosh, we have to talk about the language and the terms moving forward about of poverty versus finances, and the impact poverty could have on it as well. That's a whole nother segment, but this is the start of something absolutely amazing. And I thank you folks who are out there on YouTube and folks who are on here as well. Ms. Jones?
Thank you so much. It was really informative. And like Mr. McCarthy was saying, I learned a lot. I knew I wasn't amazing with finances, but this just reminded me I have a lot more to learn. So thank you so much for spending the time with us and giving us this valid, really good information.
Yeah, if anybody's interested, I just put this in the chat. If anybody's interested, I do have an activity that you can do in your classroom. It takes like one day. It's really amazing. It walks students through, no, that's Malala. It walks students through being able to look at W-2s and being able to look at 1040s, to be able to walk them through the process of actually filing their taxes, which I think is another set of like talk. But if anybody's interested in that, feel free to email me or reach out. Would love to be able to give that content to any teacher or any person, any student who might be interested.
And that sort of speaks to what is needed, right? Like I think how we teach financial literacy is another thing. Like I think there should be some project-based learning. I think we should create these peer learning, create peer learning communities so kids could live it, right? And treat the school as, if you treat the school, our school, as a business, right? Kids could definitely get real-time experience in terms of like learning how to be more financially literate. So if there's not anyone else, thank you guys for coming out. Thank you guys for supporting us in the Zoom, which sort of feels like a VIP with all these brilliant minds in here. But thank you guys. We look forward to Mustafa. Let's go.
Yeah, this was just a question to Courtland if he was gonna post the slide that he showed us in Google Classroom so we can see.
I can definitely do that for you, Mustafa. If anybody else wants to, actually, I can send it to Mr. McCarthy. I shared it with him. If he wants, share that with the people. If he finds it, there are some links at the bottom to the different clips, as well as some other clips, some newspaper articles that I thought individuals might find useful in terms of teachers if they wanted to create a curriculum based around it. So I will be doing that. I can also send out, like I said, the tax activity as well. As far as the recording for this, that is in somebody else's hands.
I have it. If you need it, trust me, it'll go into our catalog. But most importantly, I forgot to add this last point. We are doing this because we don't want our students to get hoodwinked.
Yep.
Just bottom line, we don't want you to get robbed, right? We want you to learn to navigate. That's all it comes down to. Mustafa, is that your hand for real, or you just didn't take the other one down?
No, that's my hand for real. I was gonna ask Mr. Courtland. Yeah. So would you recommend going to a private or for-profit school or a state college?
So I don't think I would ever generally, I don't think all for-profit schools are bad. So I don't want to say put that out there, but just know that when you say for-profit schools are different than private schools, are different than public schools. And so I know that like a lot of young people don't understand those differences. And so you want to be able to understand what the difference is between something that is considered universally a for-profit school versus a private school versus a public school. Those are three different buckets. And so when you say for profit, it's a very different thing. I would tell someone, at least for the ones that people universally think of as for-profit schools, I think myself, I wouldn't push a student to those schools specifically or generally, but know that private schools are different. I would say it depends. One, when it comes to applying for colleges, one of the things I would tell you is first concentrate on your education and concentrate on your story, because there's tons of individuals who I work with who, they think that they can't afford college. I go like, but you don't know that. Like, that's the one thing. I promise you, I tell all the students, man, you give me 1100 SAT, you give me something in the range of threes, and you can fashion someplace where you can get half of your college, 3/4 of your college paid for. I can tell you, I have, a student that's in my education program, Jonathan, who has a full ride to Yale. I have another student at Harvard. And I'm not saying that, saying those specific colleges because they're high colleges. I'm just telling you that the amount of money that seems crazy, right? You don't know the amount of money that you can get. And what I would say is, instead of concentrating on private versus public or the money itself, concentrate on building your scholastic capital so that when you go to college, you can go, hey, I am in the top 25% of my school. I'm on the top 35% of my school. And that is worth something, right? Those MCAS scores, I tell people all the time, like, that's not something to sleep on, right? Let those other people sleep and you work in so that you can get higher amounts. You can fashion a lot of things. And I know that it's a big thing, like, how am I going to pay for college? Work on your education, work on, the community and what you can offer them. I promise you'll be able to do it if you have that.
And it will be feasible, and it would be affordable. I know Bree's in here and we talk, and I'm like, listen, EHS has, between juniors and seniors, I think the amount of kids with over a 3.0, it is unlike anything I've ever seen, average, right? And you get a 3.0, you have a strong college essay, and our guidance department is really good, and they're going to get you there and support you all the way. I think being hit with that number, right? Like, I'm not anybody from Bentley out there, how I feel about y'all, but y'all $69,000, right? But and when our kids coming to ninth grade, they see $69,000. That's twice. Some of the kids, that's twice the amount of money in their household. But it scares them away, right? So why am I doing all this work? So it's our job to just say, hey, this you can afford. We have a student who got into one of the best schools in the nation, and I was literally talking to him 2 months ago, telling him, like, listen, there's no way they're not going to give you 97% of. There's no way, because sometimes the expectation is so low of students from urban communities that they are, oh my God, like, we're going to give you the money. But the unique opportunity of being at Everett High School with and doing so well with all the things that we are able to offer, this is not a PSA, it's the truth, right? There's a path, and that's our job, to show you that there's a path financially for you to go to college. And it is not so much the academics, it's the experience. Like, college saved my life. And being able to afford college and meet the amount of people, learning how to navigate different kinds of people. Like, I'm a Black man, I grew up poor, I keep saying that, but meeting affluent Black folks was also a culture shock for me.
Well, what I told you guys before, like I said, if I had to buy a car every day just so I can burn it outside, and that's what tells you how valuable your college education is I would do that over and over again if I could still live in today and have this. There are some mistakes that I made because I didn't know anything about financial literacy at the time. And so there are things that I try to talk to students about, but I would tell you, focus on your education. The finances will handle themselves. Focus on your education. The finances will handle themselves. I promise you. But you have to be able to make sure like I said, it's a triangulation. Give me 1100 SAT. That's the value I usually tell people. Usually I try to get 1200, but anyway.
Or better, right?
Or better. So usually it's 1200. I can tell you right now, I usually have a system that I usually try to teach my students, whatever. Give me that. Give me like 3 point, man, you don't even have to be high 3 point. Give me like 3.3, 3.4. We can find a way for you to be able
Yes,
to
yes,
access.
we
A lot
can
of
find
people
less and less than that. Give me over a 2.0 and we could figure something else out as well.
Well,
Yeah, all right. And we could figure something out. That state school qualifying, we could figure something out.
Yeah, like right now,
we don't.
Meandering into a different talk, but if anybody has any if there's any students out there, like I said, I work with a lot of students. If anybody has any concerns, what I would push you is please come see me. I imagine there's a lot of teachers, a lot of individuals, Jones, McCarthy, other individuals. I promise you they're willing to help you. I know it's hard to navigate. Like I said, we're meandering into something else, but please feel free. Please feel free.
All right. With that being said, we are going to end our YouTube stream. Everyone here, just do a quick wave. All right. And